Jazakallah khair for having me. I always love coming to the UK. Actually, I feel more at home in the UK than I do in the US. Maybe because of the Queen being on our money, I don't know why. Maybe the attitudes are similar with Canadians and Brits as opposed to Americans. Not all Americans. Like the brother was saying, what I'm going to do first is I'll just give you a chronology of my life, and then I'll try to make relevant the topics that we'll discuss. So I'm originally Indian background. My family is from India. My father actually, he was sent here from India by his father, and he grew up in St. Albans. And he actually studied here in St. Albans High School and did some technical studies here. And in the 60s, doing technology in Britain made you very valuable in terms of employability in Canada, America, wherever else. So he was given a position, he was offered a position in Canada with a telecommunications company. And just to kind of show you how, the kind of milieu from which I emerged. And I want you to be aware, self-aware of yourselves from the milieu in which you emerged and how you work and operate. So Bell Canada was the company, and Saudi Arabia had contracted with Bell Canada to do some of their telecommunications work. And of course they said, well, Makkah and Medina, we just allow Muslims. And so Bell Canada says, well, we happen to have some of those. So my father was actually responsible for setting up the telecommunications system in Mecca. And they gave us a piece of the kiswa, the cloth that covers the Kaaba, which we still have, and I'm trying to get him to bring it from India to Canada. And this is still subject to verification, but supposedly also some hairs of the Prophet ﷺ. And Imam Bukhari kept hairs of the Prophet ﷺ in his turban. Khalid bin Walid kept hairs of the Prophet ﷺ in his turban. It was a very famous story when he was in jihad. His turban fell off. And he was looking around. He had gone around the battlefield looking for his turban. So this is, I had not even been born yet. Then in 1975 I was born. And in the early mid-70s, this is when most of the Indo-Pakistani immigration began into Canada. And there was one masjid. And my father had set up, I think it was the second oldest organization, but my uncle, was my dad's brother-in-law, had set up another organization, which is now the largest congregation in all of Canada. So from the start, this community building began. Because for them, there were no masjids. This was the main thing. And I think because they were influenced by Tabligh Jamaat, they were not Tablighis per se, but the influence of Tabligh Jamaat, which encourages making alive the masjids and the centers of Islam. So at 5 years of age, I was dragged to the madrasa where my father was teaching. And he taught the madrasa for the children and also for adults who had been coming, new Muslims, born-again Muslims, as this is another term that we'll introduce. And so I grew up in that environment, and I had finished reading the Quran very early age. I started studying fiqh, Hanafi fiqh, from the age of 11. And then I was in public school the whole time. So what's happening is, and I kind of look back, I do a lot of reminiscing. I have a home culture, which is very conservative, not politically radicalized in that sense. My father didn't talk politics at all. I was mostly spiritual. And so I have one value system at home. Then I have another value system that's being created from public school systems. Then when I got to high school, I joined the Army Cadets. This is, I think the British also have that. It's from the age of 12 to 19. It's for kids and young kids. So this gave me another value system. And what started happening was, as you start to become aware of yourself, I thought to myself, who am I supposed to be? who am I supposed to be? Are you Indian? Are you Canadian? Are you Indo-Canadian? What, you know, so these things started to happen, and I wasn't really willingly religious at the time. I think pressure from the community, I think the Indo-Pakistanis know this very well, pressures from the community to conform to a particular understanding of religion, which it was strange to me. I grew up in Toronto, Canada. Most of my friends were white, you know, Asians, black, Italian, Portuguese. I had one Indian friend, and all the Indian Muslim friends I would see at madrasa or at the masjid, at, you know, in the evenings, and it was very ritualized and rigid, and you didn't really have room to develop and grow, I think. So what started to happen is I started to feel the guilt, and I thought, oh, I'm a horrible Muslim, and you know, what I need to do is I need to become very religious just to kind of balance out. So at the age of 19, I went with the Tablighi Jamaat 4 months to India and Pakistan. And maybe I'll return back to, because it's a, you know, 4 months immersion. I never really experienced India in that way. The poverty was really what opened my eyes to just to the world situation for Muslims, etc. So you know, they have this thing called jawla, and you kind of go out, and you know, I always refer it back to the military context. So jawla is like a outreach thing. So we would go to the different shops, and I was in a place called Quetta in Balochistan, and unbeknownst to me at the time, that was the Taliban Shura place. And I remember being in a masjid, which later on, you know, Christiana Amanpour from Sweden, she was standing in front of the masjid that I had spent time in, and I remember in hindsight that they had a whole shura, Taliban shura, that was taking place adjacent and alongside the Tablighi Jamaat shura.
What was shura?
Just a gathering. What are we going to do? It's sort of like a briefing sessions, they call them. So I went out, and so Canadians we're known to be very open, friendly. We talk to everybody, and so I thought I'm going to be hardcore, and it was October. It was in the afternoon, and we were walking around. I went to shopkeepers and different people and giving them the dawah of the Tablighi Jamaat, which was, and in some sense it makes sense. You know, the whole thing was you bring about change in the world by being more ritually observant, by praying more, by fasting more, by doing dhikr, remembrance of God. And a lot of faith traditions have this concept of by reviving works, the world around you changes. You know, there's an ayah in the Quran, Allah does not change a condition of the people until they change what is within themselves. So we came upon this one place, and it was a very arid, almost desert-like area, but there was this walled compound with foliage growing out of it, a lot of green. So as we turned the corner, squatting on the wall were about 10 individuals, big beards, black turbans, ammunition belts, and guns. So now here I am, I'm coming from this background, I come from the Army Cadets, and I see this and I'm completely enamored by them. I think, these are Sahaba. I mean, these are companions of the Prophet from, you know, the 700s, here they are. And this was a kind of romanticization of the past that a lot of Muslims still continue to fall into. So I approached them, and I could see the local was visibly distressed. You know, he was like, you know, let's not go there. But I wanted to talk to everyone, so I went and spoke to them and gave them the dawah, and they responded with, they were polite, they listened to me, and they said, through the translator, it says, no, the way to change the world is with this, and he held up his AK-47. So I thought, okay, that's interesting. So when I returned back in September 1995, the Taliban had taken over Afghanistan. I took that as a validation of their worldview. I thought, well, they said that this is how you do it, and they did it, so they must be right. So I left the Tablighi Jamaat movement, and I joined it's a Salafi form of Islam, but they were very extreme. It was the Jihadi Salafis. And these individuals, young guys like myself, disenfranchised maybe, their identity was always being questioned. And this is a theme that you will see that features regularly throughout not only my journey, but looking back and talking to other people since then, many people's journeys. Who am I? What is my role here? What does it mean to be a Muslim? How Muslim am I supposed to be? These were all the kinds of things that swirled around while I was with this group. And we talked about jihad all day long. That's all it was. Our identity centered around the mujahid identity. And suddenly it became, to be truthful, we became like gangsters. Is really what we were. We were just thugs with an Islamic veneer. And so now having been with this group, we started to talk about fighting, and we had to go somewhere to fight jihad, and it was all about jihad, everything. And even some of the convert brothers, whatever you want to use, convert, even some of them, there became strange discussions on, my parents are not Muslim, can I take their money? And I didn't think really at the time, but it really showed you that there was a complete disconnect with their support structures. This is really what it came down to. You move away from your parents, you move away from other people, you become a very select group. Within that environment, extremism is very easy to fall into. So I basically maintained this jihadi mentality from about 1996 all the way to 2001 when the September 11 attacks happened. And by then I had become very politically radicalized. I didn't like anything about the West. The West is kuffar, disbelievers, infidels, all bad. And to be honest, I celebrated the attacks when they happened. Now, I should add, from 1995, after having gone with the Jamaat, now I had grown a big beard, I had my black turban, I was wearing the thobes, and I really went into the role, if you will. And pardon me that I'm going to describe it this way, but it's like a costume that people put on. Like a costume, like a sports mascots, they put because it was unnatural, I believe, for me anyway, and it's in hindsight that I make these conclusions, but I'll try to validate my understanding here. And so when the 9/11 attacks happened, I heard on the radio, I said, Allahu Akbar, and God is the greatest. The Americans got what was coming to them. But I was working in an office building, so as I drove up the driveway, the way that goes is you drive up and then you see the building in all its glory. I was seized with the idea that a plane might fly into this building. And here I was, ultra-Muslim. Nobody was going to call me to tell me, hey, get out of the building, we're going to bring a plane in it. I would have died just the same, as many Muslims who did die on that day realized. So this was the first, what we call a cognitive wedge that made me rethink, wait a second, how is it that I could have come to validate this worldview, and yet this is the product of it. So it was a very, I'll kind of describe the day because it really impacted me greatly. It was a secure building in which I worked. It was contracted to the federal government, so there were a lot of security checkpoints. And it was the most uncomfortable elevator ride up to my floor I've ever had. I could see the people out of the corner of their eye just looking me up and down. Does this guy have his ID? One lady even looked right at the ID. And when I got to the room, and we've been doing contracts with U.S. companies, so there's a lot of New York business, and we had some Americans who were actually working there. So as soon as I came into the first thing was that even before I had gone up, I came and I said, "Hey, did you hear a plane hit the building in New York?" So then he was like, "Wow, yeah, I you know," and then somebody else comes out and he says, "Hey, did you hear a plane hit a building in New York?" I said, "Yeah, I just said that." He says, "No, a second plane." So I thought, oh man, and like always, please don't let it be a Muslim, right? And unfortunately, you know, it was Muslims were involved. So very uncomfortable elevator ride. I came upstairs, and I was very lucky. The supervisors who were there, they came to me right away. They said, "Look, Mubin, if anyone says anything to you, please let us know. You know, we'll deal with them." They were concerned that I was the only ultra-Muslim working in that place. You know, they had seen me praying, and some people didn't really know, and some people had tried asking questions. And then I could hear some of the conversations that were happening at the time. You know, one girl, she walked by, she said, "You know, we should bomb them back to the Stone Age," you know. And then somebody else responded, "Well, that kind of attitude is why these people did what they did." So this kind of dynamic was happening. And again, the identity is called into question. Who am I? Now all of a sudden, people think I'm Osama bin Laden. They think I'm with the terrorists, just because of the way that I looked. So I decided I need to leave Canada. I need to get out of the West because the war was coming, and I should go and migrate to a Muslim country, and this is where I will live happily ever after. And again, back to the romanticization of the Muslim world and this utopia that we create for ourselves. So I said, okay, I need to go and study the religion properly, because growing up, a lot of the Indian Pakistani communities, you know, you're just kind of learning how to read, but you don't know what you're reading. You're just a repository. You're like a parrot. You're just, you know, you don't know what it is you're reading. Even the Ba of Bismillah, if you see how much was written on this. So I'll get to a little bit of what I experienced in Syria. So at the same time, I had been involved in a lot of da'wah work. Way back in the early 90s when it was still Yahoo Chat. That was the internet. And it was Islam/religion chat or something like that. And I did a lot of comparative religious stuff. You know, a lot of Muslims, we get really interested in that because, and I developed this attitude as well, and it was, I'm going to learn about your faith, but not to understand your faith or to understand you, but to find out how I can destroy your faith. And somehow that would mean that my faith would be validated by it. This is a logical fallacy, of course. And I also found that with that aggressive, hostile approach, it didn't really work in terms of bringing people to Islam or to Allah in general. So I was doing a religious studies degree by distance education at that time, and there was no way that I would get into Saudi Arabia with a book called The Jewish Jesus. That wasn't going to work. And I thought about going to Egypt, but it was too expensive at the time. And it just so happened that, you know, my father, he runs the masjid, and they were doing some construction, or some construction was being done, and a couple of the workers there were from Syria. And so they said, "Oh, you want to go and study? I have a home in Syria, why don't you use it?" So I said, "I guess I'm going to Syria." And that's how I got to Syria. So when I had gone first, and my wife and 2 children at the time, they followed a couple of months later. I went to set up shop, as I called it, and I went to just check the different places I was thinking of going to for studies. And I eventually ended up, first I had to do some private Arabic studies before I could get into the Jami'ah level studies, the university level studies. And they have two streams of training, of education. One is the Ma'had, which is it's like a madrasa, so it's like a 7-year program. And then you have the Jami'ah, or you do the Takhassus, which is the degree program. It's a 4-year degree. And I chose Usul ad-Din, the fundamentals of the religion. And this covered all, the main topics: hadith studies, aqidah, deen muqaran, comparative religion, lugha, all sorts of topics. It was a very broad-based, broad exposure to a number of topics. And I started to realize a number of things in Syria. And the first thing is that I was in a bona fide police state. And I know we use this term in modern discourse in the U.S., of course, with NSA spying, and there's a whole issue with the British cooperation with the U.S. in that regard. But this is not a police state. Nowhere close to a police state. Little things like, you could not say anything against the government. Are you kidding? No way. Every cab driver was an informant. They would ask you loaded questions, so what do you think of the ruler of our country? And I honestly didn't know much about the ruler of the country. At the time, the father had died, Hafiz al-Assad, and the son, Bashar al-Assad, who was there now, he had just kind of taken power. So I really didn't know much about. So I answered honestly. I said, look, I'm not interested in politics, so I don't really know much about it. And then they would ask, what do you think about the Shias and different groups of Islam? And I just said, well, all I know is they believe in Allah and they believe in the Prophet as the messenger. I think all the rest we differ on maybe here and there, but at the core of it, we're the same. So I was called Taliban there more than even in Canada, because in the Arab world, Indo-Pats, we're a lower caste of people for them, right? I think we do menial labor in their places of business. So I thought to myself, I'm coming to a Muslim country. Like, how am I getting this kind of treatment? Now, because of the forced, I don't want to call it forced. It was more of a fascistic secularism. There, it's forced. You can't be ultra religious without being harassed in some way. Most people didn't have big beards. Which, to my shock, I thought, I'm in a Muslim country, how come these men don't have beards? Why are they walking around wearing these kind of clothes? So I left the West, because of these kinds of things, and now I'm seeing it in the Muslim country. How dare they? So you can see the kind of arrogance that comes with, I'm so pious because of the way that I look. And so things like the masjids were closed between prayers. I was stunned. I said, how is this even possible? So they explained to me that, well, at the time, in the early 80s, mid-80s, when the Muslim Brotherhood was a bona fide terrorist group, they would conspire against the government in the masjids. So the government said, okay, you know what? Go and, do your prayers, get in, get out, and we're going to close the doors and see you for the next prayer. Immediately I thought back to the masjid that my father was running, and we could leave the doors open 24/7 if we wanted. And conspiring against the government, nobody really does in the Canadian context. Maybe they might sound off against the government, but no real conspiring. But nobody was you weren't gonna disappear if that happened. And the family that I was staying with, so the gentleman, the brother that had given me his home to stay in, his sister and her family was living there. And it's weird the way that the houses were actually very close together, but if you walked on the road, you had to go all the way around. But if you climbed up on the roof, you could actually walk across just two roofs, and you would yell out, "Yalla, yalla," so that if there were women there, they would know that somebody was walking. So the brother had been disappeared. And this was just another example of, it was a complete disconnect with the way that I thought it was supposed to be and the way that it really was. He wanted to open up a store a little too close to another guy who had a store. So the other guy says, picked up the phone, called the mukhabarat, the internal security, and said, he's Muslim Brotherhood, pick him up. And they picked him up on his way to work. And 7 years later, they dropped him back in the same place where they picked him up. It was about 4 years after he'd been picked up that the sister even found out where he was and what was happening to him. And I met the brother, I talked to him, I talked to other individuals who had been imprisoned by the Assad regime, and started to get a picture of a horrible place to be living in. That certainly was not the utopia that I thought it was supposed to be. So there was the being called Taliban, the masjids being closed, and it was funny, I was trying to get some work teaching English, which is what a lot of Western citizens do when they get there. All the Syrian schools refused to hire me. Because beard, turban, robes, I was too Muslim for them. It was the American school that hired me. Because, well, Western laws, we don't discriminate. You're from Canada, you don't have an accent. Well, you guys might consider me having an accent. Or maybe it's you that has the accent now, right? We're English. We invented the language. So the American school hired me and paid me much better than the Syrian schools were paying me. So this was another thing for me to realize, you know, I was so confused now at this time. I was supposed to hate these people, but they're the ones giving me the job. So these were the kinds of things that were building up at the time. Then finally, with respect to the Islamic education and training, there was one sheikh that I became friends with, and very, very lovely brother. And a young guy, very young guy, and even the older shuyukh would come and sit in his class. And they called him Sheikh al-Bahar, the ocean. And he had like almost no beard. And I thought to myself, there was one other incident where I'll return back to the sheikh, but just to give you an example of the arrogance that I had come to experience. We were in the place, and again, you know, they don't wear black turbans because it had become associated with the Shia. So when they would say, you know, brother, why are you wearing a black turban? You know, so I'd rattle off the hadith, you know, An Jabir radiallahu anhu. دخل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم مكة يوم الفتح وعليه عمامة سوداء. The Prophet ﷺ entered Mecca on the day of victory, and upon him was a black turban. So I felt so proud of myself, and so they kind of just looked like, all right. And so we were in a place, and people started to. This one brother came, older guy, and he had like scruff, like he didn't even have a beard. All right, he was an older gentleman, so you could see the white and the gray and scruff. And everybody flocked to him. So I thought, what? Who is this guy? And they were like, what kind of sheikh is this? You know, he has no beard. And it's like, you don't know who that is? I said, no. It's like, this is the sheikh who does the double checking of the mushafs that are printed in Syria. He was the expert in Syria on the Quran. He knew all the recitations. He knew. And you know, it gets technical in the sense that he knew the sanad all the way, all the chains of narration of every particular line of recitation. So he was a real expert, and here I was fixating on why this guy doesn't have a beard. Another example along this line, British individual, in the Indo-Pak background. Apparently, you have a lot of those here in the UK, So in one opinion in the Hanafi fiqh is that if you don't have a beard, you're a fasiq, you're an open sinner. Now, in the context of way back then, that is how they would have understood it. But you know, he's still rigid on that way back when thinking. So here he is, having come to Syria, and he says to me, he says, brother, I don't pray in the masjids. I said, what? He's like, because all the imams are fasiq. And I was struck by the idea that, subhanAllah, he came to learn the religion, he came to learn the deen. Allah brought him all the way to Syria only to keep him out of the masajid. This is very dangerous, like, on a person's soul, I think. So that was another example. So coming back to the sheikh that I befriended, young guy, good-looking sheikh, nicely dressed, smelled nice, you know, and so I was talking to him about, I said, you know, brother, I said, Ana jihadi. I said, I'm a jihadi. So he laughs. He says, "MashaAllah, MashaAllah." So now I don't know if he thought maybe, you know, was I trying to set him up by the government side and maybe, you know, imprison him or whatever. But he says, "MashaAllah, MashaAllah." He says, "On what tariqah of jihad are you on?" So what path of jihad are you on? So I thought, path of jihad? I said, qital, killing. He says, "MashaAllah, MashaAllah." He says, "Have you killed your nafs? Your ego, your soul, your ego. Have you killed that first?" I thought, no. I said, "We're supposed to kill kuffar. You're supposed to kill disbelievers." And he says, "Oh." He says, any disbelievers?" I says, "Yeah." He says, "Oh." He says, "What's your proof?" So what proof am I going to give him? So I said, "Afwan, I don't know the ayah, the verse in Arabic. You see, I knew it in English." So he laughs. He says, "MashaAllah." He says, "You're talking about jihad." He says, "You're not even going to quote me the Arabic verse." Okay. And then he says, he says, "We have a lot of work to do, with you." So what this showed me was that here I was with all these ideas and this and that, and I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything. I didn't know the meanings of so many verses of the Quran, and there was no way I could cross-reference the ahadith in Arabic. So basically, over a 2-year period, I lived in Syria for 2 years, and I studied there for 2 years. And he explained to me all the verses that I thought I knew. He'd completely debunked the understandings that I had come to champion. And a number of things started to happen. This is how I got out of Syria. While I was at they have this Kulliyat al-Adab, the Faculty of Literature in the University of Damascus. This is where initially what people used to do is you would go there, sign up for Arabic classes, get your document saying that you're here, signed up for Arabic, go to the Ministry of Immigration, and they would give you an iqama, residency status, and then you could go wherever you want and do whatever you want. A lot of people did this. They left the university and they went to private places to study. And some of the people that I had met there, a lot of British nationals that had been there, Indo-Pakistani background, some reverts as well, converts, whatever. And a couple of the individuals had gone off to Tel Aviv. They used their British passports, got into the Golan Heights, entered into Israel, and one of them blew himself up in Tel Aviv. The other individual tried to blow himself up, but it malfunctioned, and he tried to I think he tried to swim away or something, and he died, and his body washed up on shore. So the government then, they said, they got to crack down on this, and they said, find all the Western students, put the boots to them, in the sense, pressure them. We don't want their trouble here, because it was going to bring British and American pressure. And so me being one of those foreigners, and I wasn't even living in Damascus, I was living outside of Damascus in a place called Al-Kiswa. And my wife, she's Polish background, she's glow-in-the-dark white, and they had never seen Westerners, and Indian guy, and it's like, you're here to study Arabic and Islam? It didn't register to them. For them, why would you come all the way here to study Arabic Islamic studies? Like, don't you have people back there to do that? So, and she didn't speak any Arabic. I had to get all the food, and I had to learn, because buying bread, buying eggs, milk. And so I said, you know what, a lot of pressure started to come. The mukhabarat came to my place, interviewed me. It was the Christian mukhabarat guy that was the nicer guy. The Sunni Muslim guy, he was completely hostile and aggressive. And so again, another thing to just totally confuse me, to say that, what am I doing here? I thought to myself, I came to learn, and alhamdulillah, I did learn. But the environment was so distressing to me. So I left. I packed up my stuff after 2 years, and I left. So I come back to Canada in 2004, and one of the brothers that I was in the Quran madrasa with my father's, in my father's madrasa, at the time we were, I think, 9 years old. I'd been friends with him, his brothers, his family. We played together as kids. So now we fast forwarded to 2004. He's in the newspaper. He's been arrested on terrorism charges. He was connected with the fertilizer. There was some fertilizer bomb plot here. He was making the detonator for it. And he's a Canadian guy. And he was talking online with a British sister. He wanted to get married with her. And she was asking him, are you down with the J? Are you down with jihad, right? So this was their... And you can see, and I'm going to make the point openly, with brothers and sisters who are maybe trying to get married, and there's almost like this thing where like you gotta hate the West, and otherwise it's like a part of your mahar, your dowry. It's like, how, from a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you hate the West? And it's like, if it's 7 and over, you're a good fit. So there are emails that were later reproduced, and it showed they were discussing all kinds of things and trying to get to know each other, and that seemed to be one of the topics that they discussed. So. And meanwhile, he had been working with the federal government, Department of Foreign Affairs. He was doing IT stuff for them. And on the side, he was building a bomb detonator, This is what we do in our spare time. So I saw his picture and I thought, this has to be a mistake. This can't be. I mean, the father, they're very good family that they come from. So I actually called the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, and I said, this must be a mistake. I know this. I know the family. I wanted to give a character reference, basically. Unbeknownst to me, though, I mean, people do things in secret that you're not aware of, that they're not going to tell you. So they said, well, thanks for your input, but this is beyond, this is out of our hands now. It's gone into the courts for prosecution, and but we want to talk to you. So I met with them, and I told them my story of, from here to there, and how I had this newfound appreciation for being in Canada and being a minority in Canada, and wow, I mean, do we really have rights in the Western countries? I'll be honest, I'd rather be a Muslim minority in a non-Muslim system than be a non-Muslim minority in a Muslim system. I shouldn't even call it Muslim system, because I don't really think they behave Islamically. But you have places like Pakistan, where, I mean, they'll burn Christians to death. And it's silly. One British individual recently, he's now being, they want to execute him for blasphemy. He has mental illness issues, and I don't know what he claimed, that he was a Mahdi or something funny, but they want to kill him. Right? A woman, you hear these stories. A Christian woman drawing water from the well, one insults the other. They go back and said, oh, she insulted the Prophet. I'll kill her. So basically, so they said to me, like, well, we want you to consult for us. We want you to tell us who you consider to be the threat to national security, why and why not. Why or why not. I said, yeah, I could do that. And so I became an undercover counterterrorism operative for Canadian Security Intelligence. And because I had a lot of street credibility with the radicalized groups, because I was part of those groups and those individuals. And I knew the mentality, I knew the thinking. I knew, for example, Hizb ut-Tahrir, guys, we have them in Canada even. Those, little things like, look, these are politically radicalized individuals. They're not going to blow themselves up. Okay? They're going to talk about Khilafah, this, that. But they're not really, I mean, some places they're watched, but there are certain views that are not terrorist views. Okay, you're allowed to have them because we live in a free society. So I basically became this operative, and I was working undercover for 2 years, deeply embedded in groups, individuals that were under surveillance, whatnot. And like I said, I would tell the government, look, you better watch these guys. And other people, I said, you're wasting your time with them, right? They're just talkers, and they think they were like me. They had this, and I could see this again back to identity. Who am I supposed to be? And I'm a Muslim. How can I spy on my own people? And these were the kinds of things that people they use as arguments against it, and I'm not going to get into that, but it was just more, here I had come from this journey, and I was still on that journey. Things that you had to bear privately and individually. These were brothers, as far as I was concerned, good people. And in some cases, there were guys that I know that they were going to be picked up. But, I mean, they were up to no good. What could I say? You know, I mean, my whole justification was always, I thought of myself as a jihadi cop. You know, I thought even if you think about, you know, whether it's Khilafah, Islamic State, blah blah blah, you have to have a police service. I mean, it's like public transportation. You know, it's like a necessary service. There's a whole thing about Umar radiallahu anhu when he began the constabulary services in Medina. And there's a hadith in Bukhari about he would conduct night patrols and expose the suspicious people and protect the people. And you know, and Qais bin Umar was a police chief to the Prophet ﷺ. Right? This is from Bukhari as well. So the policing context is I mean, well attested to in Islamic sources. So anyways, so I did that for 2 years, and then there was one case which, I mean, it moved into a criminal prosecution. What had happened was a number of individuals, they wanted to have a terrorist training camp 1 hour outside of the city of Toronto where we all lived. And, you know, they had this whole idea, they wanted to, you know, blow up this and kill that. And so long story short, in 2006, 18 individuals were arrested on terrorism offenses. And I'll be honest, these were not hardcore terrorists. They were kids like I was. They had really crazy views. They actually took it one step further. I mean, I was talking about jihad and I was ready to go to Chechnya, and we saw all the jihadi videos from Chechnya. In fact, I picked up, it was called Russian Hell 1, 2, and 3. I picked it up in Mecca, of all places, and it was all the videos on the fighting against the Russians. And so 18 individuals were arrested, and I spent 4 years in court testifying at various legal hearings, 5 legal hearings. In 2010, so in 2008, I began undertaking a master's degree in policing, intelligence, and counterterrorism. And this actually, because it started to make sense why I had done what I had done, what my role was, the machine of bureaucracy that's the government machine that's above you, and you can be as altruistic as you want to be, but when you're engaging with a system like that, you will just be swept in. I mean, they don't have room for one individual with these altruistic views. So I undertake this degree to make sense of what the function and role of government in this regard was. And now I'm actually doing my PhD through Liverpool University in psychology of radicalization and extremism. And what I've learned from this is it's psychological processes of groups and the dynamics of groups, and what happens when you have a charismatic preacher, and when you selectively quote from scriptures. These things, there is a confluence of factors that come together which create the extremist and the terrorist. It's not just one thing, it's not just foreign policy, it's not just ideology. It's a holistic thing. And I think this is where I wanted to make this point and actually bring it back to the lesson itself. So I've told you about myself, and I've made little notes along the way of my... 2 minutes?
After tea will be your lesson.
Oh, okay, tea, of course. Yes. Forget these things, you know. Okay, so I'll just recap. Like I said, just the growing up, the cultural background, the environmental influences, the questioning over identity, who am I supposed to be, how religious am I supposed to be, if I'm not this religious, does this make me a bad Muslim? What is a good Muslim? You know, does he have the turban, beard, and robes and looks like he came out of the 7th century? These were the kinds of things that I was always thinking about. And eventually with exposure to religious knowledge, I think was the real, the main thing, accessing proper religious information, meaning authorized scholars who can take their sanad back to the Prophet ﷺ, and give you context and give you understanding. What does this Arabic word mean? You know, when I talked about the ba in Bismillah, when they do what is called i'rab. I'rab is like a grammatical deconstruction of a sentence. And it is just fascinating and amazing when they talk about the depth. You know, one sheikh gave a very nice example. Don't think to have the monopoly on the understanding of the verses of the Quran. Because Allah says in the Quran that if the trees were made into pens, and the oceans were made into ink, and it was replicated 7 times, you could not exhaust the words of Allah. So he said to me, he says, don't ever think that you have the exclusive interpretation of any verse or ayah. If people come up with something else that's different, albeit attested in the traditions, then you can't say anything to them. So after all of this, and then of course I mean, sorry to have kind of thrown that little, like, then I became an operative. It was just part of my journey. I could not have imagined it, anticipated it. I walked it, I learned my lessons from it, and I moved on. And now this is where I've come, and inshallah, I guess after your break, we'll get into the heart part of it. It's the best part. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you. Tea time, yes.
Okay, so I'm going to enter the second part of, and this is supposed to be the actual lesson, on the heart. And I liked that the brother used love. And so the first thing that I'm going to do is make the framework, if you will. And it starts with the very first Hadith Qudsi, that what Allah, Hadith Qudsi is a statement of Allah, but on the tongue of the Prophet ﷺ. My mercy prevails over my wrath. My mercy prevails over my wrath. So Allah is telling you what His, if I can say, what His mentality is like, what His approach is. So when we perceive of deity, of God, what kind of a God is He? Is He a vengeful, wrathful God that your beard's not long enough, you're going to hell. Your pants are not above your ankles. You know, brother, the hadith, it says, the one whose pants drag below, he's in hell. And people, they quote this literally. And, you know, there's a whole thing, the Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu, he said to the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "O Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even me." And the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, no, you know, because his falls down out of whatever, so it's not talking about you, it's talking about pride and arrogance. And you'll notice pride and arrogance connected to the devil, and the devil being rejected from paradise because he was arrogant. So first, Allah is merciful. His mercy prevails over His wrath. And before we recite anything, what Allah, even reciting the words of Allah, we are told to recite what? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And I like to translate ar-Rahman as grace, full of grace, and Rahim, full of mercy. So there is a dignity that Allah has, that He imposes on Himself even. And mercy, again. So you have to even recite the words of mercy before you read His words. Third, that the greatest creation was the Prophet ﷺ. And Allah uses the term, the title in the Quran, Rahmatan lil Alameen, mercy to the worlds. I'm going to take it a little step here in my understanding, and Allahu Alam. But this concept of the Prophet ﷺ being a mercy to the worlds is that the worlds receive mercy because of their salawat on Him, because of their sending salam on the Prophet ﷺ. There is no other ayah in the Quran that begins with Inna Allaha wa malaikatahu. Allah is attesting, Inna, Verily. There's no doubt on this. This is, when you look at inna wa akhawatuha, inna, even linguistically, it has impact on the word that comes after it. So, inna Allah, said verily Allah, wa malaikatahu, and Allah's angels, yusalluna ala nabi. They do salah on the Nabi. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe, sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. They give salam on him and do it in a really good way. So, this is the framework in which we operate. That our Allah is a merciful Allah. You know, there's a very famous quote, and I love this quote, from Sheikh Rumi. It's the best quote. He says, ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, even if you have broken your vow 1,000 times, come. This is, he's talking about the mercy of Allah and how wide the road is to Allah. You did this M.O.T context. Verily, the road, the path is straight. It is a straight path. Sirat al-Mustaqim. Istiqama, meaning an upright, straight path. But it is also a wide path. It is not a narrow path. Because Allah is al-Wasi', the wide, expansive, all-embracing. So the path is wide, meaning that it encompasses, it carries many people on that path. You're not the only one on that path. Many people are called to Allah from many different ways, many different pathways. You know, one example was when one brother was explaining the differences in Islamic jurisprudence. He says, imagine it like a 4-lane highway. You have, you know, one lane will bring you closer to a particular exit ramp. Another is specifically for individuals who are, you know, there are 2 or more individuals in one vehicle. So you take this high occupancy lane. And then you have passing lanes. And then slower traffic keeps left. What do you guys do here? Right? Left, alright. So little things like that. If you can see the path to Allah in this way. So, the heart. There's no way that I could talk on the heart in a little time. Because the heart, they say, is the cradle of the soul. The soul sits in the heart. And by heart, we're not referring to left ventricle, right ventricle. We're referring to something else that is intangible. Something else that we really can't, if you cut somebody's chest open or their brain open, you're not going to find this thing called heart. If you cut things open, you're not going to find things love. You won't find it. You can't isolate it and say, here's this electrical impulse that's going up to the brain. This is a love thing. I mean, not yet. Allahu Alam. Maybe we'll get to that point. But at this point, we're not there yet. So whatever this thing, what is this thing, heart? And this was such a great thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did when He created insan. So much so that the angels, they knew from their experiences with jinn what would happen with the creation that was given free will and, you know, given license basically to do what it wanted to do. The angels, they said, the first thing they said was, whoa, Allah, are you going to create something that spreads mischief and sheds blood? Now look at the linkages here. Spreading mischief and its correlation to shedding of blood. There's a linkage. So this is what their understanding was. So of course Allah says to them, listen, you know, I know what you don't know. And then there's a whole thing where, you know, the creation, Adam alayhi salam. And I mean, I don't know how much of a backstory I want to get into, but you know, the whole, there's like numerous traditions where even when the jism, when just the body, the empty body of Adam alayhi salam was there, you know, Iblis came to him and like basically says, I'm going to get you, you know. And look, you know, the whole story of, we know this is in the Quran, when Allah ordered everyone to bow down to Adam alayhi salam. Not bow down to him in worship. Silly. You're worshipping Allah, but the way, if Allah tells you to bow down, well, since you worship Him, you do what He tells you to do. So they understood that. You're just obedient in that sense to Allah. But of course, Iblis, he says, wait a second. I mean, it was really at a, if you can look at it even on an elemental level, his was a smokeless fire, which is a finer element than earth is. And many qualities, they have qualities seemingly better than insan. So he said, just that moment where he thought, I'm better than him. Like, how is that possible? If you really look at, if you go into Iblis and even his own biography, and they say, there wasn't a spot on earth that he had not made sujood on. And he was, raised in rank and brought all the way up to the proximity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He came to a point where he was teaching angels things. This is why when Allah was showing off Adam alayhi salam, one of the things he said to them was, name the things. He had given him instant knowledge like this. When Allah says, I know what you don't know, and then the next thing he does is that, tell them, now, name the things. And they were so amazed because he was saying things that they themselves had not heard, even from the likes of Iblis, who was teaching them. So here's an individual, here's Iblis who grows up and he's doing everything right and and then he blows it. He blows it at one instance because he thinks himself better. And arrogance, how much has been written on arrogance, kibr, and why when somebody makes the whole thing, associating partners with Allah is the most heinous thing that could ever be done. Why? Because the right of being greater than everything else is Allah's alone. Is Allah's alone. Not yours, not his, not hers, not theirs, not ours. Allah's alone. So, at an earthly level, individual human being, how could it offend Allah that I think myself better than him? Allah has made it, he sees that this is something so bad that even if you're doing it to another individual, he doesn't like it. And this is something that I learned from many examples where even a non-Muslim person, don't ever think yourself better than them just because you have Iman. Because you don't know if you're going to die on that Iman. You don't know what journey, what pathway your life is going to take you. I have met individuals who were ultra-religious, who they left the religion completely. They got out of it. For whatever reason, they were forced into it, or things didn't work out in their life, and they had this expectation that, well, I'm ultra-religious, everything is supposed to fall into my lap, right? And unfortunately, that's not how Allah works. You have to toil. You have to work. It doesn't come easy, right? There's no free lunch, they say, right? Even the bird, when they say the bird, even the bird has to apply its muscle power to go and get the food, right? And even though for them, like, food comes out of the earth, and just like for us, it grows on trees, you still have to make an effort to. So, heart and arrogance, connected things. Again, in the context of M.O.T, I like this, because the heart is like the computer in the car. And like the Prophet ﷺ said, there is a piece of flesh in the body that if it is not right, everything else will not be right. So your car computer, if it's not right, when you indicate left, your wipers will go on. Right? There's little things like that. It throws everything off. You could have an accident. You could become injured because of what you've done in that state. So the first crime, if I can call it that, of the heart is arrogance. And I'll speak to my own self, and I mentioned this, that I thought myself better than people. Straight up, I was better. And I looked down on people. I was so religious. I had the beard, and I had a big beard. Like, it wasn't a small beard. Okay? And, my turban was like, the tail went all the way down, and I had put on that costume. It's not even a uniform. A uniform is different. You ask anyone that wears a uniform, and it's like, okay, now I'm representing the organization. I'm representing the service. So you behave differently with people. And so us, Muslims, it's not a costume, it's a uniform. Some of us are undercover, you know. You don't know. You don't know who, you know, on the outset you don't see it. So, arrogance, and as being the most heinous crime on the heart. Thinking yourself better than others. Whatever it is you do, you should always remind yourself. I had this one brother, he told me a very nice thing that I've tried to practice, and it's a simple statement. It's 3 words. It's, I am nothing. And what he would do is he would only say it 3 times, but he would accentuate each word. He says, I am nothing. He says, I am nothing. I am nothing. And the purpose for this is, of course, to remind yourself that in the eyes of Allah, who is greatest, you are nothing. You're lowest. This is why in sujood, when we prostrate, and our forehead is on the ground, we're at the lowest point in the salah. And it is at that point that we make the tasbih, Subhana Rabbiyal A'la. That glorified is the God who is most high. Because we are now at the lowest stage. And if you look at it even in the physical sense of your brain, the frontal lobes, this is where your higher cognitive functions operate. When psychologists look at people who are what they call an antisocial personality disorder or psychopaths, they have muted activity in the frontal lobes. And the fact that we make sujood with the forehead on the ground, there's another point, and I am extracting points from this because it's just reflecting. Allah says in the Quran, reflect. Reflect on the creation around you, and Allah even says, reflect on the creation that is within you. So there is this whole concept of the higher functioning when submitting oneself to God. So when we say we are obedient to God, doesn't mean we turn our brain off. Allah says, you know what I mean? Many times Allah is appealing to people of intellect in the Quran. Right? فَهُمْ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ. And they have no intellect, no aql. You know, or you with aql, you know, entertain these things, think about these things. So, arrogance, thinking yourself too high, and I am nothingness, bringing yourself back to the earth where you have been sent. This is when I took my beard off, I felt a weight lifted off of me, you know, straight up. That's what I felt. My wife almost cried. She's very much into the robes and the very Eastern romanticization. But I explained to her, I explained to a lot of people, I said, and of course, afterwards, people were less, you know, you were a spy, more like, brother, where's your beard? It just showed me that this is what they fixated on. That's it. That's what it was for them. You know, like Brother Manur was telling us yesterday, you know, a sheikh uses a hadith, and he's talking, and he's giving a fada'il, like beneficial instruction. And in the usul of hadith, you can use weak hadith for fada'il, for like, it's a little technical, weak hadith, you know, but they're not attested to exactly, you know, by the rules to the Prophet ﷺ. But to use it as a good thing, you can do that. But for, you know, beliefs, fiqh, you know, you can't really do that. So the shaykh is giving this long talk, and he uses a weak hadith to give a fada'il. And the student, and the fixated student is, weak hadith. He's using a weak hadith. What kind of shaykh is this, uses a weak hadith? So you see, in 1 year or the other year. So the point I was trying to make was bringing it back to the earth where we were sent. This is what I told people. I said, I came back from the skies, and I've come back down to the earth. Because we are ordered in Islam to deal with people. Islam is not an isolationist religion. When we say it's a way of life, yes, it has, economic theory, political theory, but these are things that develop in a particular context. If you want to go back and read books written by Sheikh so-and-so from the 900s, you're going to discover that people thought very differently back then. And the mistake that people make today, in this day and age, in trying to be Muslim, is looking back on those days and those times and trying to fit it into our life today. This will be your lifelong journey. You will never finish that journey. I'm telling you straight. This is because this is what Allah demands of us, that we apply ourselves. That's the whole point. If it was just a matter of, okay, get to the end of the maze and that's it, you're free, go home. Why? It's not like that. This is why Allah says in the Quran, we didn't create this for play. It's not a joke that you've been put here, and it's not just something that you do and that's it. So we've been ordered to deal with people, to be good neighbors. Simple things that people forget. In Imam Bukhari, he represents, he collected the authentic traditions of the Prophet ﷺ. I don't want to get into technical details, but there were some criteria that were listed, and whether the person who was saying that he heard the Prophet say this, do we know that he actually met the Prophet? There's like checks and balances, right? Like verification. And he wrote one book, Adab al-Mufrad, right? The etiquettes of an individual. And there's a whole discourse on when Jibreel, Angel Gabriel, alayhi salam, when he would teach the Prophet ﷺ, because Prophet ﷺ was taught by the angel. There was one point where he was explaining the rights of the neighbor. And the Prophet ﷺ commented that he says, he went on and on and on with the rights of the neighbor that I thought the neighbor would inherit from the person. He didn't say the Muslim neighbor, he said the neighbor. If you look at the example of the Prophet ﷺ, and you'll never go wrong with the example of the Prophet ﷺ. When Allah says that this is rahmatan lil alameen, mercy to the worlds, guaranteed you will find the code of life in his example. When he lived, I love this example, because even in Medina there was a whole thing with the tribes, the Arab tribes that were there, Aus and Khazraj. They had alliances and business disputes even with Jewish tribes that were there in Medina. And famous document, the Constitution of Medina, the Prophet ﷺ says, he says, the Jews of Banu so-and-so are like the Arabs of Aus. He put complete equality, not they're a little bit lower, complete equality. And very famous example of when the Jewish funeral was going by, the Prophet ﷺ stood up. The companions, they said, Ya Rasulullah, a Jew? And the Prophet ﷺ says, is this not a soul? Remember, the soul is the receptacle of the heart. The Prophet ﷺ could see things, obviously, that normal people can't see. But for him to have done that, this is a big, big thing. In that context anyway, because they thought, what? Now, I gave a talk once, and I talked about when Umar radiallahu anhu came to Jerusalem, and the siege of Jerusalem. And Umar radiallahu anhu did not catapult Jerusalem, bombarding it with giant stones. And very famous thing where, him and the servant that he had, they had a deal that we would, for a little bit, you would ride on the animal and then we would switch. It just so happened that when Umar came in viewing distance, or people they saw, Umar was walking the animal and the servant was on the animal. And they thought, what? This is a conqueror of Jerusalem that's come to, it totally threw them off. They couldn't understand, but it's supposed to be like this. And you will find out in life that how you think it's supposed to be is not the way that it's going to work out in many cases. But anyways, when he came, he toured the city. The Sophronius, the patriarch, was there. He toured the city, showed them the churches, this and that. And they, the way they do it when the conqueror comes, you you all fed him with praise and whatever. And he says, you can pray in the church. And Umar radiallahu anhu says, I'm not going to pray in the church. Why? Was it because there were idols in there? No. He says, no, because if I pray here, maybe somewhere down the line somebody's going to claim this place as ours. They're going to say, Umar prayed in the church, therefore he's claiming the church. So so the respecting of other people's places and things. Silly controversies today, silly, petty. Malaysia, you can't use Allah for God. Christians can't use Allah for what? When the Prophet ﷺ invited the Christians of Najran, he invited them into his masjid. He said to them, pray here if you want. They were Arabs. They used Allah for God. I mean, the pagans used the name Allah for God. So, I always use this example. I said, I'm like, did you hear about that Muslim guy who let the Christians into the mosque and let them pray in the mosque? Oh, astaghfirullah, brother, what? So, yes, the Prophet ﷺ. Oh, I used the other one about the imams, the imam. Because I don't mind children in the masjid. I don't mind children making sounds in the masjid. I'd rather them be making sounds there and have the mother and the father be able to do that there than elsewhere. And so I was in the masjid and something happened where I think a kid was like screaming or something from another room, right? And then the brother was very upset and I said, I'm like, there's this one Muslim imam, he was praying and man, his kids were climbing on top of him. Even when he went into sujood, and they would get on his back, and when he went down, they would go down, and when he would get up, they would get off. And brother was like, astaghfirullah, his prayer is fasid, his batin prayer. So this is the Prophet ﷺ with his grandchildren. So, another example, Umar radiallahu anhu, and I fact checked this because I thought it was the Prophet ﷺ, but it was Umar radiallahu anhu when he was Khalif. And an individual came into the room where he was, and he was basically a governor candidate. And Umar radiallahu anhu was playing with his children. And the guy came in, he had screw face, his face got all twisted when he saw that Umar radiallahu anhu was playing like a kid with the children. And then he says, Umar radiallahu anhu, he's like, you do this? And Umar radiallahu anhu realized, he says that, I'm not going to make you the governor. Because if you can't even deal with children like this, how are you going to deal with your subjects? So this is who our Prophet ﷺ is. And these are the kinds of people that he generated. They were not mean-spirited, scowling-faced. This is not what they were known to be. Right? I've heard so much of that crying. I have 5 children. So that's like, so this is what the hearts are ordered to go towards. The creation that is the Prophet ﷺ, you can never do justice. You can never do justice. I mean, if you look at how much has been written by scholars, literally 1,000 years ago, 1,443. So many writings, and this is important. I think for why I'm raising this is because, and again back to our framework. Remember, the heart is like the computer of the car. You need to program it properly, and I think the things that you should write onto it, of course, is that my mercy prevails over my wrath. Is the first thing that you know what Allah is about, and that you read everything with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, with grace and dignity and mercy. So when you're talking to people, how do you talk to them? What are your words? I see some of these guys, they're into dawah, they call it dawah. It's not dawah, bro. That's not dawah. You stand on the streets, you intimidate people, you harass people, 4 of you come and surround this one. So you're going to be Muslim, right? Bruh? They're Wallahi, they remind me of what the Prophet ﷺ said about those people who even Allah mentioned this, about people who would stand on the road when the Prophet ﷺ would give ayat and give the Quran, you know, people would be walking by or whatever. Down the road, they would set up another group of people, the non-Muslims, the polytheists. And when the person had spoken to the Prophet ﷺ or whoever, and they would come down, or they would kind of say, oh, well, you know, and kind of try to mix it up and throw people off the path. These people, this is what I see them as. I see them not as people who call to the path. They are people who scare people away from the path. They make them run away from Allah. Very good ayah. So who is worse than the one who prevents others from coming to the worship of Allah? Who is worse than this person? Rhetorical question that Allah asks. This is not hadith, this is not sahaba. Allah is saying this. Who is worse than this person? So, in terms of what you're inscribing, when we say full of dignity and grace and mercy. So when you speak to people, when people speak to you, you do with dignity and mercy. You know, now this big controversy, you know, I don't care for controversies. I step on them like, I shouldn't say like insects because I shouldn't do that. But those insects that you're allowed to step on that are pests, you know, their right is to be squished. Sorry, I lost my thought there. What was I just saying? I'm buying off into, what did I just say?
Stepping on controversy.
Yes. Cartoons. Offensive cartoons. Is that a question?
Yeah, I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Is there a point where you stop forgiving someone or stop giving mercy to someone? Or is always...
Excellent question. Is there a point where you stop forgiving someone? This is the answer. Is that what you would want Allah to do to you? To ever have you come to a point where He stops forgiving you? So if you don't want that for yourself, don't put it onto other people. Just to finish the point on the cartoons, there's a wonderful YouTube clip. It says, cartoons of hate, prophet of love. And the one sheikh that's there, he says, you know, what they used to say to him is far worse than what you hear now and what you see now. And the Prophet ﷺ was told, khudil afwa, take the side of forgiveness. And you were right, there was individuals, we're not going to make it completely, there was one individual at least who they were responsible for, they were basically propagandists against the Prophet ﷺ, and they incited violence on the Muslims, and action was taken against them, no doubt about it. The action was taken, but only because they were bringing violence on people who could not defend themselves. Poor people, slaves who didn't have the luxury of belonging to a tribe that would avenge you if you were attacked or whatnot, you see. So very specific contexts in which violence was legitimized. Even if you want to go right into the jihad thing, the very first ayat regarding jihad is, it may be that you dislike a thing, but it is good for you. It's telling you that at its root, it is something that is disliked. And to further that, permission is given to fight those who evict you from your homes. So it's telling you that, again, this is something that is normally prohibited. And that specific permission was given because of that context of food, shelter, clothing. You're being kicked out of your home, right? Those are fundamental things of life. So, dignity, rahmah, how you deal with people. And when people swear to you and say things to you. So in the beginning when I was doing the whole da'wah thing with Christians, and I wasn't ready for some of the things that they would come up with. Man, they can get really creative because they want to get you going. In 1998, I came here to Marble Arch, Speaker's Corner. And bearded out, turban, everything. I had a really good time, you know. I did a nice job, I think, with my da'wah there, debating and putting down. And some of them, they were just saying things like they just wanted you, and you got somebody with the camera, they goad you because they want you to even raise your voice and na'udhu billah, raise your hand. And they say, see, we told you they're like this, look. So how do you deal with that? You know, if you claim you have love for the Prophet ﷺ, and you're ready to commit violence on people who insult and offend him, it's kind of ironic because the Prophet ﷺ didn't do that. He didn't freak out and start breaking things and burning things down and like. So you claim this. So if you're not ready for it, then you shouldn't even get involved in that stuff. So how do you deal with it? So one thing that I think worked for me was I thought to myself first, you are there as either a means for them to come into Islam or a means for them to just regurgitate the stereotype of Muslims being crazies. So take your pick which way you wanna go. So if the person does that, you should understand that first you have an opportunity to make dua for this person. Say, oh Allah, let this be, because I love the story. Where was Umar radiallahu anhu before he became a Muslim? He was on his way to kill the Prophet ﷺ. His sword was out. He even dueled with the one Sahabi who was like, you're going where? To do what? No. Ching. And so you don't know where a person is coming from. This is something that you should keep in mind. You don't know where this person is coming from. A person could be mentally ill for all you know. The person could have come from a traumatic background. Maybe they were abused by Muslims. And this is why they're coming to you like this. And if you're just going to confirm what they already know, well then you're no different than the one that put them in that state. In fact, may Allah protect you, you could be questioned for this on the Day of Judgment. That I sent one of my servants to you. You don't know who these people are. There's very famous stories of, in that time, beggars who would be sent, servants of Allah, who were sent as beggars to the doors to see how you would respond to them. There are many hadith about the Sahaba who, they were poor, but they would still find it a way to help the poor person. Somebody who was even less fortunate than them. So you don't know who is being sent to you. So always assume that Allah is sending me either a test or something. How am I going to respond to it? So I would encourage you that you remind yourself who you are. If you claim yourself to be a believer, one who walks the path, sorry, that popular cultural reference, Matrix, when Morpheus, he says there's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path. And you notice, Neo, he couldn't jump the building because he didn't believe. Right? That was the whole point. So if you claim to be a believer and you claim to walk the path, then you better be ready. You better be ready. When the Sahaba said to the Prophet ﷺ, oh Prophet, we love you. The Prophet ﷺ said, watch out. Because the heat's going to come. The heat will come. If I can just reference my own life, when I was deciding, do I become, if I move over to the RCMP, the federal police, I'm going to be exposed to the community. And I asked my sheikh, I said, I'm afraid that the people are going to, come after me, not physically, but they're going to attack me and this and that. So he looked at me with this thing and says, so are you doing it for Allah or are you doing it for people? So I thought, I'm doing it for Allah. Little did I know, the heat was going to come. And the heat came. It came like I could not imagine. And I left this little bit out, but I might as well share it with you now. In terms of where the hearts, where the journeys lead you. Where you think you're doing everything right. You think you're doing it for the right reasons. And then you're put into a situation where when people look at you, they say, look, he's cursed. Look, Allah is punishing him for what he's done. And I came to a point of utter despair. Utter despair. I was on the verge of leaving Islam. I'll tell you straight. And again, so I was driving. I was in this state of mind. And I saw this border services agent. He was waiting at the bus stop. So I said, let me give this guy a ride, right? So he comes inside, non-Muslim guy. Gets inside, we're driving. I drove him to his stop. And he said one thing to me. I don't know how it came up, but he says, it's really only in the depths of the valley that you appreciate the majesty of the mountains. Subhanallah. I found Allah again in the darkness, because it says Allah takes you from darkness into light. which is interesting because the Canadian Forces Military Intelligence motto, E Tenebris Lux, is from darkness, light. So I took this, I was in depths of despair. And when everything had been cut and removed away from me, that's when I found Allah again. And it was much better because it was pure. There was nobody else to, interpret or put it on me in this way. And, ever since then, it didn't matter what people said. It really didn't matter because now I had really found Allah in a real way, experienced Him. And so, back to my point, when people come to you and they say things to you and this and that, for your heart to bear insults, you increase in rank. There's this mystical group that emerged in the early times there where they called the Malamatiya, and a little odd group. They would do things that were seemingly un-Islamic so that people would insult them, so that they could be made humble, forcibly even. So remember back to the I am nothing? Remember that at times. It comes in very useful. It really brings you down. So again, inscribing the program. So I said the mercy prevails over wrath, the Bismillah, dignity and grace and mercy. So when somebody's swearing at you or this and that, whatever, it's difficult to do. I know, it's very difficult. But nobody said this was going to be easy, right? Right. And the third thing is, always refer to the example of the Prophet ﷺ. You never ever go wrong with that. The way that he was, the way that the people understood him to be, how they perceived him. At worst, even when they disbelieved in him, they said what? They said, these are stories that he's being told, that he's just regurgitating. Or in some cases they would say, oh, he's possessed. But never did they say he was a liar. Never did they say he was a criminal type person, thuggish in his behavior. That story of Ta'if. The Prophet ﷺ was sent to Ta'if to make da'wah to the people there. What happened? They stoned him. They stoned him to the point where his shoes, they had blood in them. And the angel, when the angel that was responsible for the mountains and the areas, apparently, Allah has sentries everywhere. The angel came to the Prophet ﷺ. He says, O Prophet of Allah, you give the word. You give the word and I'm going to bring these mountains together and I'm going to squish those guys, right? But the Prophet ﷺ says, did Allah send you? The angel says, no. I came, because remember, they serve him. They serve him. So then the Prophet ﷺ says, no. He says, leave them. Maybe somebody down the road will embrace Islam from their tribes. Sure enough, lo and behold, it did happen. But look, it's not going to come easy. It's going to be very difficult. But you'll never go wrong with the example of the Prophet. That even in those most difficult circumstances, this is how he behaved. And some people might try to throw in, oh, well, this event happened and those events happened. And events happen, of course. Welcome to life. You know what I mean? Like we have it in our own societies where we uphold these, values, and yet you see the government might do something wrong, the military might do something wrong, somebody does something wrong. That's human beings. That's how we are created. Don't look for a perfect, nice and neat and fuzzy-wuzzy. It's not like that. That's not this dunya. That is not this dunya. You're not going to get that here. So those are the three things that I would say that one should inscribe onto the heart to guide you. Because your journey, some of you, I look at you and some of you are new Muslims and, born again Muslims and not yet Muslims and, I'm getting there Muslims, right? And that's what I consider myself now. I'm just on the road, man. You want to walk the path with me? We can have a good conversation on the way there. But you will find that you will be a much happier person when you take the burden off of you of thinking you need to convert everyone in the world. Okay? It is against the sunnah of Allah that everyone become a Muslim. And the proof of that is in the Quran. If we had willed for everyone to believe, would have believed. So don't think that, yep, this idea that Islam has to be, that's false. I mean, you're going against the sunnah of Allah. So I would just say that once you take the merciful approach, and you always, if there's only one thing that I would tell you from this, it is that you send profusely salawat on the Prophet ﷺ. The way it will enhance your life, you cannot even quantify. You can't even quantify. Back to that ayah. This is something that Allah Himself does repeatedly. Yusalluna is a present progressive verb. It's something that He's always doing. Always. Him and the angels. So join them. That's the only thing. And wallahi, it saved my life, I would say, from like just utter, ruin. It saved my life. So this is what I've experienced. This is what I encourage you to try to take up in your life. And please just make dua for me and everyone, Muslim or non-Muslim. Making dua for people, the angels make dua for you. Non-Muslim doesn't matter, so what? What, you can't have a heart? You can't feel good about somebody? You don't feel bad for people? They could be suffering for whatever reason. If you are one of those believers, and you believe you are a conduit of Allah's message, well then make dua for the person. Maybe by your dua they become healed. One of the whole thing with, abdals, there's like a whole, sorry, I don't want to, that's way over there. Very, very pious people who Allah has selected, this is what they do. They make dua for people. That's all they do. They don't make dua for themselves. They make dua for other people. They know that they are nothing. So they ask Allah, oh Allah, I who am nothing, you're everything. Help this person, work, school, whatever it is. Dua for people. And salawat on the Prophet ﷺ. Jazakallah khair. ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين.
You talked a lot about Sirah and the Prophet and the softness and the love that we should learn from him. Why do you think that we've lost the softness with each other now? Because to find Muslims who emanate that dignity, that grace, that softness, that you want to be able to have a conversation, to debate about the heart, the soul, without judgment. And that's so rare, that often we're so harsh with each other that it almost dilutes Iman. Why do you think that might be?
You say dilute, I'm going to go as far as saying in some cases it negates Iman. Because you are giving a false representation. It's a fraudulent misrepresentation. So directly answering the question, I think there is a literalism that people have fallen into. A superficial Islam. And because they have their programming, the program writing is faulty. They've inscribed on their hearts a very literal understanding. So they'll just go, this is what the verse says, done, boom, finished. But again, this is why I use the example of don't think you have the monopoly on the interpretation, because this is what Allah says about His words. That they're so deep, they're so deep that if the trees were made into pens and the waters into ink, and you replace them 7 times, it still wouldn't exhaust the names of Allah. So I think first and foremost, it is the literalistic approach that people take. Secondly, not enough dhikr. Not enough remembrance of Allah. There are some individuals, they get upset when people do dhikr in groups, let's say. Or just an individual who's doing dhikr loudly. Dhikr is just like, it's like incantations, I guess. Like you would just say Subhanallah over and over. Allah, Allah, Allah. Just, you're focusing, you're connecting the heart. They don't do it. Not only do they not do it, their faces scowl when they see others doing it. So I always used to say, and I even say this now, says, whose face scowls with the remembrance of Allah, if not Iblis himself? Says, the screw face that I see on your face is how I imagine Iblis's face to become when he hears the dhikr of Allah. If you look at the salawat to the Prophet ﷺ, that is like, you notice they don't do it. They don't do it. So it's not in their life. That is what brings life to the hearts. So their hearts are dead because of it. And you see it. You see it in their life. They're not happy people. They are not happy people. Don't ever let them make you feel bad because they've put on the costume. Don't ever let them make you feel bad because you're happy. I'm happy. Look at my face. I'm happy. Look at your face. Here's a mirror. Not happy. Right? Who is on the path, you tell me? Khalas. So maybe they need to be reminded gently. Sometimes they don't like to be, they're like children. Really they are. Because that's their mentality. Their mentality is they're already like, so you need to kind of bring them. I know it's a little condescending, patronizing, but I explain to them that maybe you need to challenge them sometimes. Is this how the Prophet ﷺ behaved with people? The blind man came to the Prophet while he was talking to the pagan leaders. The Prophet ﷺ frowned and turned away. Boom, whole chapter. Abasa wa tawalla. He frowned and he turned away. Allah reprimanded the Prophet ﷺ for just frowning and turning away from the blind man, because he was engrossed in trying to give the da'wah to these guys. So I would remind them of these sorts of things. This is why the more you study these kinds of things and you access this information, you can then return it back to them, hopefully. So I think the literalism and the lack of the dhikr, because the dhikr revives the hearts. Allah says in the Quran, isn't it by the dhikr of Allah that the hearts feel contentment? So it's
natural, isn't it? A natural person.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Anything else?
Don't be shy. You have questions.
Sometimes in life, you feel really connected, and
Other times,
other times you
not so
feel
much.
disconnected. How do you know you should be doing more? Do you feel guilty? But there's something probably stopping you, blocking you. Any advice in terms of how you address that and get yourself back on track?
So, look, it's just not possible for people to be 100% all the time. You're not created that way. You're going against your created nature when you do that. You can never be at that point. I can't say you can never, but for us in Western context, maybe we got religious a little bit later in life or whatever it is. There are many things that are in our background as baggage that we have. Everybody's got it. Everybody's got it. I don't care what you look like. You got baggage. And Allah knows this baggage. And yes, we know that 5-time prayers, this is how it's supposed to be, and da-da-da, but things happen. I remember I was trying to do the 40 days of prayers properly. Everything was going perfect. Day 37, I'm like, yeah, man, I'm on day 37. I'm going to do it. I slept in the Fajr. I slept in on the Fajr. My alarm was set. How could I sleep in? How did that? I was so upset. I said, Allah, man, I'm trying to do this for you. I'm trying to do the 40 days because I'm such a sinner, blah, 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 this and that. I had a dream. And I didn't see who it was, but I was hearing a voice. The voice says, your efforts are good enough. So I'm not, your efforts are good enough. We are not looking for you to, do everything you're supposed to do. When we see you, thinking, oh Allah, you are in that place. You are there. When you're already like, yeah, I should have, I could have, I fell short. This is again the complete opposite of arrogance. That is where you want to be. So some people might take this as, oh, astaghfirullah, the brother is saying, it doesn't matter if you miss a prayer.
Just remind us, Sheikh, when Sahabi Hanzala, one day he saw same sister and he went to the mosque. On the way he saw Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And he said, where are you going? He said, Nafaqa Hanzala.
He's a hypocrite now.
Yeah, he said, and he said how he feel. Abu Bakr said, oh, I am munafiq as well. Then they went to Prophet Sallallahu and Prophet Sallallahu said, you can't. If you are like this, the angel will shake hands with you. In one riwayah, he said, if you don't do a mistake, Allah will remove you, bring in other people doing mistake and doing tawbah.
Doing mistakes and making tawbah. The Sahaba, when they came and they saw the Prophet ﷺ, I think he was asking Allah for forgiveness. Prophet of Allah asking for forgiveness. So the Sahaba says, oh, Prophet of Allah, you're a clean slate. He says, yeah, but should I not be grateful? So take it as you can do it. There's another hadith that if you try to overtake the religion, if you try to do too much in the practice, it will break you. It will break you. And what happens is you then go all the way into a rebound, and you become so depressed because you were so good, and you think to yourself, no, I'm so bad. No. Look, unless you're killing people and robbing people and and doing really, really bad things, you're fine. You're fine. If Allah's mercy prevails over His wrath, do I think that He cares that I missed a few prayers here and there, or fasting or whatever it is? I don't think He cares. No, I don't. I don't think He does. No. If you've tried and you've done so much, you can just keep doing it, man. Just keep doing. Just keep going. Keep on keeping on, they call it. Right? So that's it. Salawat on the Prophet ﷺ. You'd be surprised how your life becomes easier.
We are valued and we're everything. If you imagine, I say for myself, my mother, she would fight till her last breath for my interest. She loves me more than anything in the world. Doesn't matter what anybody else thinks of me, whatever I've done wrong, that she would always have this, see me with so much value. That we're all created by Allah, and as creation we have this intrinsic value in that context.
Well, this is why when God created insan, Iblis was like, what? And the angels were like, what? But there is something there, so definitely.
So I think that when you have a situation of arrogance, when an individual believes he's superior, or a group of people believe they're superior, it leads to problems, because logically it follows that the rights of others take lower priority over their rights, and then they may be prone to doing things which cause disharmony or that are bad for others or whatever. But at the same time, I think it's important for every person to realise. I think
that you are something. I mean,
yeah,
it's good that you broke it into both contexts.
Low self-esteem is a problem for a lot of people, and I think people need to be confident in themselves, and I think they need to, because if people are confident, they feel good about themselves. They'll treat themselves well, they'll treat others well, and they will achieve more in their time here. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, no, that's important. I want to just quickly, just on the point on self-esteem, I don't want to turn it into a... But I needed to do that because you're right. People, they're made to feel lower by others who you may cross paths with, who they can rattle off the hadith and the ayats of the Quran, and like you're like, oh, I can't even pronounce that word. But don't let them make you think that he can rattle them off, therefore he's better. Oh, no. Iblis can do a much better job than all of you put together in terms of rattling up hadith and ayat. So this is important also, that people should keep in mind that in one context you are nothing, yes, but in the other context you are actually so great that Allah makes dhikr of you to the other creations. So
Maria had a question.
yeah.
You mentioned that it's against the Sunnah of Allah that everyone will become Muslim. I guess when people become Muslim, they obviously love their non-Muslim family a lot still, if not even more. And they obviously want them to become Muslim as well. And there's a very difficult, do you go hardcore dawah on them? Or do you, I know the answer is show them how you have become better through being a Muslim, showing them, the softness and the excellence of the Prophet ﷺ. But it's still, I'm so scared that Allah is going to ask me on the Day of Judgment, why didn't you do more?
No. Inshallah, by your example, your family gets into Jannah. You as the intercessor for them, not the other way around. So you see what I'm saying? My brother-in-law is Jamaican convert, used to be Rastafarian, Naya Bingi tribe. When I first got married, my wife comes from a staunch Catholic, Polish Catholic family. Brown guy, hairy, bearded, turban, robe wearing. They wanted her to marry a nice Polish boy, right? Didn't happen. And in the beginning, they were like suspicious of me. And in 2005, I remember I had gone to Yemen for work, and the father-in-law says to her, he's allowed to marry more than one wife in Yemen. So she's like, no, it's not that, whatever. When I came back, everything came out publicly that I was working for the government. It's the first time my father-in-law gave me a hug. He's like, oh, I thought you were a terrorist. Straight up. So now her and her mother's relationship, she used to be a goth chick, rebel, dreads, tats, everything. Now their relationship is so much better. And they have beautiful grandchildren, so they're so much happier. I don't make any dawah to them. She does. She's veiled and she does the whole thing. But by her good example, they come to respect Muslims and Islam. They say that these are good people. And like you said, that is the better way. That you show them through your own example that you have become a better person. But Allah is the one who guides. You are not the one who guides. You should remove out of your mind completely the idea that I am going to be the means of them becoming Muslim. Just take that out. It's not up to you. It's not up to you. Inshallah, if that's what Allah wills, that's what Allah wills. If that's not what He wills, that's not what He wills. And that's why you make dua. And inshallah, Azza wa Jal, the one who is so merciful, He's not going to look for things to throw you into hellfire over. He doesn't do that. He's going to look for excuses to make. If the Muslim is told that give 70 excuses to your brother, 70 is a figurative number in this context, right? The point is, Allah Himself will overlook so much of the things that you berate yourself over. Wallahi, I believe that a lot of us are going to get there thinking, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And it's just going to be like, yeah, you're in, yeah, let's go, yeah, you're in, yeah, you're in. And we're just going to be like, what? You mean I stressed myself out that much? And that will be the point of it. That will be the point of it, that you did stress yourself out, that you did feel, I haven't honored the religion properly, I haven't done, even in the one salah, you might say, maybe I didn't do that salah right. Relax, take easy. He doesn't go around with the checklist. You know, we know the whole thing of, I gave this one talk in the masjid, and I said, and I had told them about my whole background and, you know, terrorism, counterterrorism. I says, you know, some servants of Allah have followed me here, and they're recording everything I'm saying. And the brothers were like, start looking around. I was like, yeah, the angels, Kiramun Katibin, they write everything down, even what you think they write down. And if you commit a sin, they say, oh, hold on, don't write it down. Wait, let's see if they make tawbah. And when you do make tawbah, it says, okay, now have the memory emitted even from the earth where the sin was committed. Wow. When Allah says, most forgiving, most merciful, He means it. This is why the first hadith Qudsi, the thing that insan is to know, my mercy prevails over my wrath. So, this is a concern for a lot of new Muslims, and I would just say, you know what, remove the burden off it, because it's not your burden to bear. It's not. So inshallah, with dua or whatever, at the end of the day, I think, I don't believe Allah is as nitpicky as we are. Those individuals who go around and say, oh brother, beard, oh your beard is, oh okay, it's fine. It's not how He works. I honestly believe that there are people, they're just good people. I don't see Allah sending them to hell. I just don't see that. Allahu Alam, we always leave everything to Him. And that holds true even for ourselves. The Prophet ﷺ, always go back to the Sunnah. The Sahaba said, the Prophet ﷺ said, we all go into Jannah by the mercy of Allah. Even you, O Prophet of Allah, even me. No deeds, mercy of Allah. So, I think if you honor Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you honor the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and you do it, here's the thing. وَمَنْ تَبِعَهُمْ بِإِحْسَانٍ إِلَى يَوْمِ الدِّينِ. Those who follow him with ihsan to the day of judgment. And three things. What is Iman? And then it gives you the beliefs that you're supposed to have. What is Islam? Here are the 5 pillars you're supposed to do. Right? So what you're supposed to believe, what you're supposed to do in terms of actions. Ihsan. There's a very famous hadith. The angel Gabriel comes in the form of a man in front of the people. They see him. The commentary was, we saw him and had this brilliant white robes. No signs of journey were on him. Because a guy just walks in in the desert, like, I mean, you're sweaty, you're all haggard, you know, but this beautiful guy comes in and he's like, what? And he comes and sits with the Prophet and starts asking the Prophet, what is this? And the Prophet replies, and then he says, you've told the truth. And everyone's like, what? Who is this guy that he's coming, he's asking the Prophet, and then he's saying, yeah, you're right. And at the last, he says, what is ihsan? And the saying was, أَن تَعْبُدَ اللَّهَ كَأَنَّكَ تَرَاهُ فَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرَاهُ إِنَّهُ يَرَاكَ. That you worship Allah as though you see Him. And if you do not see Him, and actually in Arabic, فَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرَاهُ, meaning that you have never seen Him, know that He sees you. So what it's telling you is that you are in a state of God awareness at all times. You don't just think about God when it's time to pray. You don't just think about God when it's time for... You're always thinking about Him. Because you're in love with Him. You're in love with Him. That's all you can think about. And when you this is why, when you make Allah the beloved, things happen for you. I'll say it straight. I have seen like Muslims, they don't even pray. Or Allah alam, if they do pray, maybe in secret, I don't know. But man, things happen for them. And like they don't, I'm not gonna judge. I'm just gonna observe what I've seen from their life. And yet here are others who they pray 10 times a day. But look at them. I feel sorry for them. They're not happy. They get divorced because they're always fighting with people. Is this how the Prophet ﷺ was described? Is this when you read the seerah and you read these things, is this what you hear him being like? Fighting with the people, arguing with the people? No. No, no, no. So, I think if you come to that point of ihsan, where like you're always in communication with him, he's the best. People, they don't know him. Sorry, is the food here?
Because
I think we don't have a relationship with Allah. I think people they when they talk about, you've heard people say, oh, I don't believe in religion, I believe in, right? I understand what they're saying by that. I understand. It's like rituals fixating on this and that and whatever, and they've lost him. They don't even know him. They don't talk to him. You talk to him? Talk to him every moment. Let your heart be in communication all the time. At night, I always try to do this. There's a, if I can, for a lot of people who are, there's a certain dhikr, like even on YouTube you'll find there's non-stop la ilaha illallah. And it's, oh man, there's this one, I think it's a Turkish version. Oh, I'm completely like, it's the best. Oh man, it's like, it does la ilaha illallah, like a group of them are doing it. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah. And then at the end, as-salatu was-salam, and he does this like salawat on the Prophet. Wow, your heart will burst, watch out. You have to like tie yourself down. It's serious stuff. So I think that's good. You just reminded me of something. Yeah, learn your knowledge. That comes. You're not going to become an alim or alim or sheikha. You're not going to do that in 5 years, 10 years, 50 years. You're not going to do it. So relax. You're not going to gain all this information. So one thing that I learned when I went to Syria is how little I know. I had read hundreds of books. Hundreds of books. I gave them away, actually, because I got out of this, subject, and Allah put me into a whole other field of study. I had literally a ton of books. A ton of books. I hadn't read every single one of them, but I read most of them. Arabic books, like this fiqh and the whatever. Oh my God, it was just like, and then I realized I know nothing. So I just stuck with, well, he knows everything, he knows me. So, and I'm saying, I have a lot of baggage. I've done a lot of things which, I'm sure everybody else has done, or some things I'm pretty sure you haven't done. But you know what? I'm not stressed. I'm not. I gave that stress up. That burden, I took it off. I was like, I don't want that. I don't want that. Allah will carry my baggage for me. Let the angels do all that. That's not my job, right? My job is just to always be like, yeah, Allah, you're awesome. At night, before I go to sleep, I always when it's just by myself, just for a moment. There's so many hadith about a moment that is spent on the contemplation of the greatness of Allah is better than the whole world and what it contains. A moment. And here we are, we put so much on us. I was like, oh, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. And no, not really. You just gotta be, you just have to know that He's there, and that's it. Develop a relationship with Him, and you will do that through the salawat of the Prophet ﷺ. That before I wasn't so much into that. I'm completely because you see this. If Allah is saying that He does this and His angels are doing this, mercy to the worlds, there's not a creation that is there that does not give salawat to the Prophet ﷺ. I'm missing out, man. I can't do that. And then you, who is the greatest creation, if you start doing that, it puts you up on levels, man. These are not small things, So